Let's talk about some Champo news, Justin, and we'll begin with Middlesbrough, who have reportedly narrowed down their new manager shortlist to 3 candidates following the sacking of Michael Carrick. The Northern Echo says it's coming down to Steve Cooper, Rob Edwards and Danny Rule. Marti Cifuentes and Steven Gerrard aren't believed to be in the running despite recent reports, and an appointment is expected to be made in the next week. So the question is, Justin, which of these do you think is the best suited to take over at Borough?
Danny Rule for me. I think Borough need to get him ASAP, to be honest with you. I think if you're looking for a manager who's on an upward curve, who's going to develop your players, who is adaptive in his style of play, I think Danny Rule fits the bill. Steve Cooper will bring success, but he'll do it his way. Is he realistic? Maybe. Maybe not. Will that develop players? Again, maybe not. Rob Edwards, I'm most sceptical about him for the reasons we spoke about in our managerial top 5s. I think he needs a job that is free of the pressures that the Luton job and this Middlesbrough job will bring. But Danny Rule, as I say, I think bringing him in, he's on an upward trajectory. He's going further up, whereas Steve Cooper and Rob Edwards are coming down, if you like. And I think as well, the most interesting thing about Danny Rule is the situation at Sheffield Wednesday could play into the hands in terms of negotiating for him. If you're not going to overcomplicate it, but the conversation it could well be a reduced one. If Borough are to take advantage of it. So I think Danny Rule, if he's there, go and get him.
Yeah, I kind of want it to be Danny Rule because I feel sorry for him. I just want him to be free of Sheffield Wednesday. Because it feels a bit like that scene from the Titanic where Leonardo DiCaprio is handcuffed to a pipe when the ship starts to sink.
What?
That's what it feels like though, isn't it? But unfortunately for him, I think he is the least likely option because unless Borough really wants him, then why would they go for the guy who's going to cost £5 million in compensation to get when the other two are both available? So that is another thing that continues to play against Danny Rule when it comes to his flirting with other clubs, shall we say. And out of the other two, I think Rob Edwards is the most likely. I did see reports last week that Cooper wasn't interested in the job. Maybe he's waiting to see what the offer is. I don't know. But I think Edwards feels like a more natural successor to Carrick for me in terms of the likelihood of it happening, but also in terms of style of play. So I think Edwards is the one who is most likely to get the job. Whether he's the best one or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they need to go for someone who's a little bit more adaptive. So I think Steve Cooper and Danny Rule are the better options there. You are right in Rob Edwards, and his attacking philosophy at times at Luton probably does mirror that of Michael Carrick's, but the way they build up plays was vastly different. But I think that attacking principle does it make for an easier transition. Did that attacking principle work for Michael Carrick? No, it didn't. They conceded a lot of silly goals. So as I say, I think someone who's a little bit more adaptive in their approach is the better option. So your Danny Rules, your Steve Coopers, managers like that. Maybe even your Marti Cifuentes, but obviously he's not believed to be in the running. So yeah, I think they've got to go all out.
Edwards was quite adaptive, Justin, when he was. Well, we'll talk about it when we were talking about this whenever it was a couple of weeks ago. And that when he was at Forest Green, he was a very different style of play to. Well, it's just as long a time ago as when Steve Cooper was at Swansea, isn't it? So, I don't think that really matters, but he's shown in the past that he can play different styles of play, which is why I think he's the most natural fit. But I don't necessarily think he's the best fit. It depends what Middlesbrough are looking at. Are they just thinking we need to get promoted in the quickest way possible? Then Steve Cooper is your man, I think. If you're looking for someone who's you want to build in the long term, then Danny Rule, maybe Rob Edwards will be the way to go about it. But that's the way I'm looking at it, I think.
Yeah, I think that adds the complication because obviously Steve Cooper will deliver a lot more sort of, I guess, urgency. The success is going to become because of his track record in the Championship of finishing in the top 6 with both Swansea and Forest. Danny Rule is obviously it presents a little bit more of a gamble in that he's a guy who delivered a mid-table finish for Sheffield Wednesday and sort of steered him away from relegation in his first year. But his long-term approach Rob Edwards, I think, just offers a little bit too many risks, whether or not his style of play is similar.
Is that purely just because of last year, Justin? I get 100% why you'd have
He's been
those.
losing games for 2 years now.
Yeah, but one was in the Premier League with the smallest budget ever. I don't think you can really hold him against him.
He failed to turn it around in the Championship. You know, that mentality never left them.
100%. I can understand why you'd have the reservations after how shocking a season last year was for Luton, but I don't think... I think it's a bad habit of yours of completely writing off managers.
I'm not writing him off. I just don't think he's suitable for this job, which is why I said I think he needs a job that's free of pressure. I think Bristol City, whilst I think every managerial job has pressure, but the pressures are different at Bristol City, which is the other link that we gave in their previous episode, than it is of Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough want success. They want to develop players. They want to keep churning that for the financial reward, obviously, and progressing up the league. Whereas Bristol City, almost the same elements, but the pressures are going to be different. The expectations are going to be different. So I think that's better suited to Rob Edwards than going into what I would say is a bit more of a hot pan, if you like.
I think that's a completely fair point. Yeah. To be honest, I'm not completely against any of those three managers. I think they would be all good appointments for Middlesbrough. Just some, I think, are more realistic and better suited than others. Let's move on, Justin, because Thomas Frank is set to be named the Tottenham Hotspur manager following the sacking of Ange Postecoglou. Now, you may be wondering, what's that got to do with the Championship? Well, it's because it may have big ramifications for Ipswich Town, because Kieran McKenna has been widely reported to be Brentford's first choice to replace Frank. So a nervous few weeks ahead for Ipswich fans, you would say, Justin.
Yeah, certainly interesting. I think we speculated that Thomas Frank going to Spurs could open the door for McKenna to go to Brentford. I think the only sort of saving grace for Ipswich is if Brentford do dip into a different market, because they've had success in doing that. Obviously, Thomas Frank came in from Denmark to be number 2 to Dean Smith and eventually took over. But playing squad wise, they've signed players from Belgium, Brazil, Scandinavia, France, etc. They could do the same with a coach. That being said, I think Ipswich are in a great place to replace Kieran McKenna should he leave. And I think I know we've just been talking about him, but I think the perfect replacement there is Danny Rule. The other name I want to throw in there is Michael Carrick, actually, because again, I think style of play it almost suits going into that Ipswich team. But I think Danny Rule, again, for the benefits and positives that I said about Middlesbrough, I think he'd be perfect replacement for Kieran McKenna if he goes.
Yeah, well, we were giving it the big guns last week about how Ipswich look to be the clear front runners for promotion next season in the Championship before the transfer business gets underway. Losing McKenna would obviously be a blow, and I would still make them my front runner even if McKenna left, but the concern I had is I'm not sure there's an obvious successor. We spoke about your Steve Coopers, your Gary O'Neills. I'm not sure there's an obvious fit style-wise. I hadn't considered Danny Rule, but you know what? I don't hate that, Justin. Actually, I quite like that. I think that would be a very exciting move if that were to happen. Michael Carrick, style-wise, makes sense. Would have my reservations based off how the last couple of years have gone with him at Middlesbrough, but you've certainly piqued my interest with Danny Rule there. So it'd be, whatever the case, it'd be very interesting to see who they get in if McKenna were to leave, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And again, McKenna does play a 3 at the back at times, and he can vary, but that 3 at the back was proved a huge success with wing backs. And Danny Rule is he's deployed that at Sheffield Wednesday on a number of occasions. So, and again, you've got a very good coach, haven't you? Kieran McKenna's made that same transition where he's gone from coach to a head coach. Danny Rule's gone from a coach to a head coach. Even Michael Carrick's gone from a coach to head coach. So that transition there, where they're just working with players, developing players, improving players. That's why I think it's a good fit. And obviously, I know I've mentioned the situation at Sheffield Wednesday. That could well present an opportunity for Danny Rule to actually get that escape from the clutches of old Dave Fontranteri. Yeah.
Now that you've said Danny Rule, I'm quite on board with that. Actually, I'm now thinking
you're Ipswich super fan over there.
Well, if McKenna leaves, I was actually quite concerned about who they were going to get, because when we were talking about it last Sunday, I was like, I just really can't see who would be the ideal person there. But Danny Rule, yeah, I think that one does whet the appetite. Let's move on, Justin, and talk about a manager who has been put in place, and that's at Hull City. They've got a new manager in charge following the sacking of Ruben Selles at the end of last season. They brought in Bosnian manager Sergej Jakirović on a 2-year deal. The 48-year-old was most recently in charge of Turkish Super League side Kayserispor. Before that, he managed Dinamo Zagreb in the Champions League. Now, we did ask Andy Brassel from Stack's European Football Show on the Continent to give us the lowdown on this guy. But it turns out he's so obscure that even Andy doesn't know about him. And trust me, that means he's obscure. So instead, we've got Justin Peach from the Second Tier Podcast to give us his best take on him. Go on then, Justin, what you got?
Firstly, Kayserispor sounds like a Pokemon.
It does. It's a very good shout, yeah.
I actually did a fair bit of reading on Jakirović, so I'm glad that you've turned to me and not to Andy Brassel. I mean, Jakirovic's longest spell was 2 years with Gorica. He obviously had a good spell with Dinamo Zagreb, but that ended bitterly, considering they conceded 9 in the Champions League to Bayern. This was last September. First time a club has conceded 9 in the Champions League. That was shortly after losing to Hajduk Split in a domestic derby. Jakirović was sacked 2 days after that defeat to Bayern. That's not to define him at all, but I'm looking at Jakirović and I'm thinking he's not had too much success outside of Croatia or Bosnia. And I think the standard of the league, I would suggest, in Croatia and Bosnia is much below that of the Championship. And I did read that, style of play-wise, he likes to favour an attacking style. Obviously, it's hard to judge him. We heard this with Tim Volter, didn't we? Therefore, can we really take it as golden? Because we didn't see much attacking football from Tim Volter's Hull City.
Yeah, well, Jakirović took Kayserispor, who were third from bottom in the Turkish Super League when he took over in January, and he guided them to a mid-table finish. Mm-hmm. They won the 4th most points in the Turkish Super League from when he was appointed, behind only Galatasaray, Fenerbahce and Beşiktaş. So that's pretty impressive. And to make it even more impressive, Kayserispor didn't sign a single player last season, which, with my limited knowledge of Turkish football, it looks like they've done very well to stay up based off that. Mm-hmm. So that's good, I guess. The problem is that is a very small sample size we're talking about here. 5 months. Can you really judge how good a manager is based off 5 months in Turkey? No. But then the same question can be asked of the whole hierarchy. How much had they seen of him before he was managing in Turkey? So, unsurprisingly, there's a lot of question marks with this guy. What I would say is he obviously a better manager than Ruben Selles? No, we don't know that. He might turn out to be, but we don't know that right now. So to sack a manager who is doing a very good job in the circumstances, so you could get in someone who's a complete unknown, seems like a mad decision in my eyes, Justin.
I agree. And as I say, Jakirović might turn out to be a success. And, fair enough, you take the gamble, you earn the credit if it pays off. That being said, what have we seen from Hull so far with their non-domestic managerial appointments? Shota Arveladze didn't do much, did he? It was
bad, really.
Yeah. And then Tim Volter as well. Yep. That being said, Tim Volter had a fair bit of experience in Germany. We know that. And Shota Arveladze actually had experience of winning titles in different countries as well. Whereas Jakirović, we've not seen a lot, have we? He's not got a lot of accolades to his name, if you like. Couple, but again, you're sort of clutching a little bit. You got to ask, is a good reputation.
Are you sure? You mean the Bosnian Premier League in 2022 and then the Croatian League in 2024? And sorry, the Bulgarian Cup in that was a player. Ignore that then. So yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. You're ignoring these accolades.
I think, a good reputation in the Balkans. Is that enough? Is it enough? Come on, it's taken you. How long has it taken Hull to come to this decision? 6 weeks?
It's taken a while, and they were being linked with plenty of managers, some much more recognisable than this guy. And look, he might turn out to be a good manager, Justin. We've seen managers come out of nowhere and turn out to be very good. But based off Hull's track record and the very limited things that we know about this guy, he doesn't inspire confidence.
Well, this is the interesting thing is when you take a risk and you go for a complete unknown, you want to look at his CV and go, he's won a lot here. He's done a fair bit. Yeah. He's overachieved at a fair few clubs. Not really done that. I mean, Zagreb and winning the league with Zagreb are one of the biggest clubs in Croatia. So it's not exactly a given. It's not exactly a surprise that he's guided them to a title win, for example. But as I say, you've got to look at their CV and go, all right, I'm really convinced here. I'm looking at Jakirović and I'm going, don't know about this. I just don't know about this.
Is he an obvious upgrade on Ruben Sellers? No. How can you possibly say for sure that he is? So what Hull are basing this on, I'm really, really not sure. And it's not the first time we've had question marks with the Hull hierarchy, is it? But this is just another one to add to that increasingly growing repertoire. Well, QPR, they're still on the hunt for a new manager, Justin, and reports in France are linking them with former Rennes manager Julien Stéphan with the job. Now, just a second ago, I said the new Hull manager was so obscure, even the god of European football, Andy Brassel, didn't know much about him. Well, fortunately, that's not the case here. So for a lowdown on Julien Stéphan, here's Andy Brassel from Stack's European Football Show on the Continent.
Hello, fellas. I think Julien Stéphan is a really interesting pickup for QPR. He's had his highlights, there's no doubt about that, in his time as a head coach, twice with Rennes, sandwiching a spell with Strasbourg. And I think the thing in common with all of these is he's started well, but when he's hit the buffers has really struggled to turn it around. He's tactically adaptable. I think he works with the players that are in front of him, so he's not stuck to any particular scheme. We've seen him with 4-4-2. We've seen him try 5 at the back as well. Some of those good results have included beating Arsenal, although they didn't get through the tie, and Milan, when he was in charge of Rennes, similarly didn't get through the tie. And with Strasbourg, he got them in his first season to their highest league position. He got them in the top 6 for over 40 years. So there's no doubt that he connects with players. Can he make it happen over the duration? That's, I guess, what the test will be at QPR if he gets the time. But he's a very interesting coach.
Thank you, Andy. And make sure you go and listen to On the Continent, the preeminent European football podcast for all the latest goings on from across Europe. So what do you make of Julien Stéphan, Justin, based off what Andy was saying and plus what you've read about him?
Yeah, I mean, suggesting that things don't quite go well when they hit the buffers is an interesting one, because where do the buffers start with QPR? Now, it's not a criticism of QPR generally, but I think over the past 3 or 4 years, a lot of difficulty has presented itself very early on in seasons with the club. So, is Julien Stéphan really the guy to oversee that? Is he the inspiration they need to oversee that? That's an interesting proposition to put towards. But I think, the difference, the stark difference with him and, Jakirović, for example, at Hull is Stéphan's got a fairly decent CV. In fact, hasn't he? He's got a good background, which would convince you.
A good league as well.
In
just
a good league.
Make sure that's very clear.
He's got a very good background in a very good league, or one of the better leagues, should you say, which would convince me that maybe the transition into Championship wouldn't really faze him. And again, I think in Championship presents a lot of difficulties. That will be interesting, considering what Andy Brassel was saying. But that being said, he's got a history of developing players at Rennes as well. A lot of good players have come through under his tutelage, like Jeremy Doku, Camavinga, for example. So there are good examples there as well.
Yeah, I think it sounds like an ambitious appointment if it happens. I'm not sure how much truth there is to it, because when I hear reports in France, I instantly think it's an agent trying to stir up what they can, or some rogue journalist or something like that. But he guided Rennes to their best ever league finish. So I'd definitely be interested to see how he got on if QPR were to get him in. So makes a lot more sense than getting a guy who finished 13th in the Turkish league, put it that way. And following reports linking him with the Cardiff City job, Nathan Jones has signed a new 5-year contract with Charlton. 5 years, Justin. Bloody hell.
It's a really long time. It's a really long time. I wanted to present this thought to you, Ryan, actually. Do you think Nathan Jones was heavily swayed by Cardiff, hence him getting a 5-year contract to make him stay at Charlton, to convince him to stay at Charlton? Who gets offered a 5-year? What manager gets offered a 5-year deal in modern day football?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure he was heavily swayed by Cardiff, considering they are the division below now, and it's not exactly the most appetising job on earth considering they are an absolute mess. So I'm not sure Suede would be the right idea, but I tell you what, him or his agent has pulled off an absolute blinder getting a 5-year deal here. Because look, I do like Nathan Jones, but I always think 5 years for any manager is a big leap of faith unless they are Pep Guardiola or someone like that. But I guess it shows that they believe Nathan Jones is the man to lead this project that they're building at Charlton, which he's definitely capable of doing, as we saw at Luton. But if things start going wrong, then it's going to cost Charlton an awful lot of money to sack him. So it seems pretty certain that he's guaranteed to stay the course of the season, no matter how Charlton get on next year.
Well, this is it. What if Charlton are winless in their first 10, or let's say they pick up 6 points in their first 15 games?
Got to stick with him.
It's very expensive to get rid of him, as you say. Got to stick with him. But that's why I sit on the cynical side of it, and I say maybe Jones and his agent have used that Cardiff link to get a very, very long contract, because a 5-year deal for a manager is so rare that, the other side of it is who's going to come in and poach him? Who's going to pay the compensation for Nathan Jones, who isn't the youngest manager in the league, for example? He's not got agent development on his side. We know what you're going to get from him. That's the other side of the coin. So it's just very strange.
Cardiff, I guess.
Well, they'll do anything to get a manager, won't they? But as I say, I sit on the cynical side of it, where I think Nathan Jones and his agent have used that Cardiff link to maybe get a bumper contract from the Addicts.
Maybe that's happened. Maybe that's exactly the case, Justin. But it's a great show of dedication from them. I guess it's just, if it goes wrong, then it makes you look very, very silly, doesn't it? Interesting, by the way, seeing that Charlton have appointed Dane Murphy as their CEO. I don't know if you remember him, Justin. He was very hot property when he was at Barnsley a few years ago. Had an absolute worldie of a season for bringing in players when they got in the playoffs. And then he went to Nottingham Forest, where he didn't do as well, although that may not have been any fault of his own, considering it is Nottingham Forest, and we all know what it's like behind the scenes there. But yeah, one to watch, I would say, for any non-Charlton fans. It'd be very interesting to see who they bring in over the next few weeks. But we'll have a quick break, Justin. After that, we'll talk about the mess at Sheffield Wednesday and all the latest transfer goss from across the Championship. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. We're here talking about the latest news from across the Championship. But before we get on to the rest of that, may I take this opportunity to point everyone in the direction of the latest video on the Second Tier YouTube channel. It's called The Rise and Fall of Leicester City, because next season will mark 10 years since they won the Premier League, Justin. 10 years. They only won the FA Cup 4 years ago. But in that video, I take a deep look at where things have gone wrong for Leicester since then and what's on the horizon for the Foxes. So make sure you go and watch that on the Second Tier YouTube channel and subscribe for more content from us. And I think one of the things we're all expecting on the horizon, Justin, is a new manager. But here we are, mid-June, and Ruud van Nistelrooy is still in the Leicester job, which is very strange.
Yeah, I'd love to know what's going on. I have a Leicester supporting friend who he always sort of wants to talk to me about, obviously, the Championship, and he's literally constantly saying, I have no idea what's going on. Don't know what's going on. Don't know what we're going to do next year. And that's quite staggering, considering the wealth of quality of player that is currently at Leicester, and there's not this unwavering confidence that they're going to bounce straight back up. Not only that as well, but Ruud van Nistelrooy, there's been rumours to sack him since, it's beginning of April? Mid-April?
I would say even earlier than that.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure when the rumours started, but I think we've all known for months that he's not going to be in charge next season. And the sacking rumours have been probably talking about February time, maybe even earlier than that.
It's astonishing. It really is astonishing. And, from what I've read, Leicester fans have pretty much had enough. The silence from the club is probably just as damaging as making the wrong decision. Because you can own your mistakes, but when you're not saying anything, it's just poor. There have been 0 announcements on pre-season friendlies at the time of recording, even the kits. It's just ridiculous. The only thing to come out of the club is, and this is a positive actually, is the future of Jeremy Monk has been sorted with a new contract, the 15-year-old who made his debut last season. But in Leicester's scenario, no news is definitely not good news. Ridiculous.
Yeah, the lad you just mentioned then, the second youngest player ever to play in the Premier League, I believe I'm right in saying. So, yeah, that's a positive, but everything else around Leicester right now, not so positive, because this is the world's longest sacking, isn't it? We're now in mid-June, and I'm guessing the players will be back in training in a couple of weeks, and at the time of recording, we don't know who is going to be managing them next season. The only excuse I can think of is it PSR reasons? Either they're just distracted with what's going on with the potential points deduction, or maybe they're waiting until the new PSR window starts and then they sack him. I honestly don't know. I'm purely, speculating there. But it's just a big mess at Leicester, isn't it? And in the video, which I was just talking about a second ago, going a lot on the director of football there, John Rudkin, who Leicester fans are. They've had enough of him, put it that way. But yeah, as I explained in the video, there's plenty of reasons to be sceptical about Leicester's decision-making going forward. So it's going to be very interesting to see who they do get in when they eventually sack Ruud van Nistelrooy. But let's talk about the rest of the news from across the Championship, Justin. And Leicester fans, if you're not feeling too optimistic about the future, it could be a lot worse, because at the time of recording, Sheffield Wednesday still haven't paid players and staff the wages they're owed from last month. They were due on the 30th of May. This is going out on Thursday morning, so I assume they don't get paid after we finish recording here, Justin. But by then, it will have been 13 days since that date where the players and staff were meant to get paid. How is this still going on, Justin? I honestly don't understand it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's got to a point where you've got players who are currently contracted to the club being very cryptic on social media. Marvin Johnson posting a Mr. Bean meme on Twitter or X, basically tapping his watch. Marvin Johnson might just be a big Mr. Bean guy. I don't know. But at the same time, he might be doing very cryptic, digs at Old Chansiri. I think, we're at a point now where Man City are close to signing Kaylen Kadamatri, who's an under-16 player, which might give the club some financial respite. But when you're offloading kids to pay the bills, potentially, it's a terrifying sacrifice for what is club mismanagement. And all of this is compounded and made worse by the fact that Chansiri obviously did recently reject an offer. Wednesday are a big club, an attractive club, and the moment Chansiri leaves and stability is found, I think Wednesday become a frightening proposition. I just want to reiterate what I've said in the past, that I feel for everyone associated with the club. I think the media surrounding it, the likes of Nick Miller at the Star and others, are doing a bang-on job of reporting on this every single day, a couple of times a day at the very least, and shining a spotlight on what is a ridiculous situation.
Yeah, it is a ridiculous situation. I would echo what you were saying there about the guys at the Sheffield Star, Radio Sheffield, etc., who I've been following non-stop over the past couple of weeks while this farce has been going on, because they've been doing a solid job. I was going to call them colleagues. Maybe they don't consider us colleagues. Maybe they could just consider us scum, but, that's by the by. But yeah, it's a farcical situation, and when there's a situation like this, it's always going to lead to a lot of speculation around what's going on. I've seen a lot of talk this week about the Thai Union Group, which is owned by the Chansiri family, how their stock price has just been going down and down. And we even had John West, the tuna company, being forced to put out a statement this week, distancing themselves from Sheffield Wednesday because the Thai Union Group make tuna. So I'm not sure why they felt the need to put out a statement, Justin, but that's where we're now apparently at, Justin.
But look, I think it's because obviously Sheffield Wednesday fans have been inundating John West's social media platforms with complaints, but
I'm not sure they're the people they should be targeting.
No, but you go, well, what the fuck?
I get why.
But all it does is just echo everything, and it just puts it in the spotlight, because it's a ridiculous, obviously, scenario. And this is obviously a very strange link with John West, the tuna manufacturer. But all it does is just create a bit more of a spotlight, which is a positive in this situation. But we're now getting to a point where, Wednesday players, there could be a breach of contract if there isn't already a breach of contract. Players will be talking to their agents; they'll want moves elsewhere. Chansiri has well and truly fucked it. It really has. Look, if there's cash flow problems, personal cash flow problems in your private dealings, and obviously a lack of guarantee of you being able to pay wages for any business, accept a lower offer and be rid of a huge financial burden on you. Simple.
Yeah. Never expected us to be talking about tuna on the Second Tier podcast, but, that's where we've got to. It's the summer.
Something fishy about this.
Jesus Christ. But yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned there, Justin, about contracts not being met. Because let me just rant for a little bit here, because it is very scary times for Sheffield Wednesday, and I'm surprised it's not being talked about more elsewhere, because the next few weeks are massive for the club's future, and here's why. Firstly, we're still waiting for players and staff to be paid for last month, but we've got another payday in just over 2 weeks. And that could be huge because according to the FIFA regulations, if players aren't paid for 2 consecutive months, players could just walk away from their contracts if they haven't been paid for the 2 weeks after the second missed payment. So there could be a mass exodus of players at Sheffield Wednesday. But that's not all, because you've got players whose contracts expire this summer, most notably Barry Bannon. They haven't signed new deals yet, so we don't know what's happening there. The club's now believed to be under a 3-window embargo, banning them from spending transfer fees on players. Not like there's money flying around anyway at Wednesday. But that embargo would also mean they're only allowed a squad of 23 players, which isn't an awful lot at all, is it? And I've even been seeing an increasing amount of talk recently of Wednesday possibly going into administration because, simply put, the owner might not be able to fund the club anymore. So it's a really frightening time ahead for Sheffield Wednesday. So many question marks all up in the air, and we don't seem any closer to having any of those questions answered.
Yeah, and the longer this goes on, the less value the club is at, really. The value that Chansiri is obviously chasing diminishes. It reduces vastly.
But the speculation is, Justin, that Chansiri, the reason why he's knocking back offers at the moment is because he can't afford to take a lower offer than what he's asking for. That's just pure speculation. I'll make sure that's very clear. But it means that if that is the case, Wednesday are very much in limbo for God knows how long.
But this is it. This is what happens when you don't look after things. The worth drops considerably, and unfortunately, you're not going to get what you want. It's as simple as that. It's the same in any walk of life. If you leave your house to rot, you can't expect 300 grand when it's worth 150, can you? This is what's happened to Sheffield Wednesday. Chansiri has not looked after it, and unfortunately, the value that he wants, he's not going to get because, the greatest respect to everyone associated with Sheffield Wednesday, it's damaged goods now. It's damaged goods. He's left it in a disarray, in a poor state, and unfortunately, this is where we're at now. And you are right. It is a scary time, and I know we've been made a couple of lighthearted jokes, but this is a worry. This is a major worry. Payday is in a couple of weeks' time. The spotlight is once again going to be on the club, and this again needs to be in a national conversation. In terms of football news, because this is a big story. Sheffield Wednesday are a huge football club, and I do reiterate. As soon as Chansiri is out of the club, the potential of it as an entity is huge. It's humongous. Really, really is. And that's why this is so disappointing. Yeah,
and the potential of what could possibly go wrong if a sale doesn't happen and he gets bigger and bigger, the longer that a sale doesn't happen. But let's move on, Justin, on to some transfer news. And Borja Sainz is expected to leave Norwich City this summer. That's according to the Eastern Daily Press, with reports in Spain and Italy saying Napoli and Porto have both submitted bids. There's believed to be interest from plenty of other clubs across Europe in the Spaniard, who finished as second top goal scorer in the Championship this past season. He's also in the final year of his contract, so makes sense to sell, doesn't it, Justin? But it is also undeniably a big blow.
Yeah, it would be a big blow, but I would 100,000% sell. I don't think he's had... It's kind of strange to say because he scored so many goals, but I don't think he's had as much of an influence on that team as Gab Sarr did the year before, for example, or even Josh Sargent. I think a player of his ability is a little bit easier to replace. I know he scored a lot of ridiculous goals, but actually his contribution in games was a bit hit and miss at times. He just had that ability to just flip a switch and do something ridiculous. So I'd recoup and reinvest. And it's easy for me to say who isn't an Norwich fan. I wouldn't be too worried, to be honest, if he did leave, because as I say, I think he's a player who he's not been around since November, has he? So it's as simple as that.
Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I also don't disagree with you, Justin, because I'm not sure what to make of Borja Sainz and whether he can cut it at the top level, because Napoli and Porto, flipping big clubs. I've seen Bilbao Athletic Club linked with him as well. So, yeah, him making the step up to that level is not something I necessarily expected to happen this summer. But look, when he's on it, he is a phenomenal player. We saw that in the first 3 months of the past season. If you can play that like that regularly, then yeah, he could be a top player. But it's hard to ignore how little he did from mid-November onwards. In fairness to him, his form dropped off as Norwich's did. Not many players at Norwich did play very well from mid-November onwards. But the bottom line is, for a third of the season, he was by far the best player in the Championship. For 2/3 of the season, I'm not sure he was even the best attacker at Norwich. But from their perspective, they've got to sell him. He's in the final year of his contract. You can't afford to be turning down large amounts of money for him. So Norwich would be daft not to cash in right now, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think if, this is going to sound so obvious to say, I think if Sainz didn't score as many goals as he did, Norwich probably wouldn't be able to demand as high a fee as they would. You know, I'm expecting
that is a very obvious thing to say, Justin.
Yeah, but what I mean by that is, on the balance of his performances throughout the season, you know, I'd expect him to fetch about £5, £6, £7 million, obviously in his last year as well. But actually with his goal tally, despite him not doing anything really since mid-November, you're probably looking in the region of sort of upwards of 10. So I think...
Say that, Justin. Norwich have reportedly rejected 13 million for him.
Fucking hell. I'm just not... I saw some really good performances, but I'm just not overly convinced by him. I think some players can have flash in the pan seasons, and I think he had that between August and October where he was absolutely superb. And then we saw the Sainz that we saw for the previous 2 years.
Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right, Justin. Maybe you're wrong. Who knows? I'm very unsure when it comes to Borja Sainz, but it wouldn't surprise me if he does turn out to be a very, very good player. Norwich have also got players coming in, including goalkeeper Dan Grimshaw from Plymouth. He's joined for a reported fee of £600,000. It comes after the departure of Angus Gunn. He was very good for Plymouth last season, Justin, wasn't he?
Very good, probably a stretch. He made some really good saves. Maybe in a team that concedes less shots, less mistakes will surface. But I did read that Norwich are looking to add a couple of goalkeepers to the goalkeeping department this summer. It'll be interesting to watch. I wouldn't be convinced if he was number one for the entire season. I do like him. He's a very, very good shot stopper. But number one for a team chasing promotion, I'm not sure.
I think he was very good for Plymouth last season. Whether I would make him a number one starter for a playoff chasing side, I can understand why you'd have those doubts. So, yeah, £600,000 though, not to be sniffed at, because that's not a lot of money at all in a modern day Championship football, is it? By the way, Norwich have now confirmed the appointment of Liam Manning from Bristol City, but we have spoken about that in previous episodes, so we're not going to go over old ground here, but go back and listen to part one of us grading each team in the Championship for our thoughts on that from the perspective of Bristol City and Norwich. Let's keep going with transfer news, Justin, and Stoke City have got their business underway by signing winger Sorba Thomas on a permanent deal from Huddersfield. The Welsh international spent last season on loan at French side Nantes. Stoke fans seem very excited by this move, Justin, particularly after how he played against Belgium the other day. Are you as excited as they are?
I am. I really, really am. Finally, a sensible transfer from Stoke. I love this deal. I think not only are you getting a player who's quality at set pieces, but as a wing back, he's a good player. He's a very good player. He did okay at Nantes in Ligue 1. And what was his first taste of top flight football in a new country, in a team that finished 4 places and 6 points above the relegation zone. But like you say, his performances for Wales in the games against Belgium and Liechtenstein were very good. Kazakhstan back in March again, very reassuring. So he's still delivering quality wise from set plays and crosses. So I think it's a really, really smart move. I really do.
I'm not sure I'm as strong on it as you are, Justin. Put it that way. I mean, a few years ago, Sorba Thomas was unbelievable for Huddersfield, one of the best players in the team which got to the playoff final. He's not been quite at the same level since then, and it doesn't look like he's had a great season over in France. 4 goal contributions all season, was very in and out of a Nantes side which finished 13th in Ligue 1. And I mean, I always say that I don't think the bottom end of Ligue 1 is too far off the bottom end of the Championship. But look, when it comes to crossing and set pieces, there aren't many better at this level than Sorba Thomas. At the right club, he could easily flourish. Is Stoke the right club? I'm doubtful. And I think recent years with Stoke is the main reason why I'm doubtful. So I'm not as excited as Stoke fans are about this move, put it that way.
I will throw this in. Okay, yeah, Stoke, you find to be throwing a bit of reservation because it's Stoke, and their ability to actually make smart movements in the transfer market in recent years has been pretty poor. The thing that excites me most about Sorba Thomas is his wing-back ability, but also Mark Robins. I think it's a good fit because of Mark Robins and how I think Mark Robins will deploy him. The use of wing-backs in his system has been proved very productive, mainly at Coventry. And I think Sorba Thomas is a perfect piece of the jigsaw puzzle that Mark Robins is trying to put together.
I'm starting to get the sense, Justin, you're creeping towards Stoke could be a dark horse again next season.
If they sign Sorba Thomas, they sign another left wing back, a creative piece, and Kiefer Moore. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
That's it. That's all it will take.
It's happening
That's
again,
all it will
ladies
take.
and gentlemen. It's happening again. It doesn't take much for Justin to get carried away with Stoke City. Let's move on. Preston have signed Thierry Small from Charlton. They've agreed compensation ahead of his contract expiring this summer, with him still only aged 20. Now, when we were doing our roundup of the new teams in the Championship last week, Justin, I highlighted Thierry Small when talking about Charlton. Didn't realise he was out of contract, but there we go. But he might end up being a tidy signing for Preston. The thing that astonished me is he's only 20. Preston are his fourth permanent club in 4 years. Sixth if you count loan spells. So gets around, doesn't he?
Yeah, the career of Thierry Small is a strange one. I think this is a very smart signing from Preston. Unusually smart, I will say. He was Everton's youngest player, which was interesting, and he cost Southampton a couple of £1 million, and then was really 6 months early from his contract so he could sign for Charlton. So he's had an interesting career, as I say. But based on his perform for Charlton in League One last season, he's 20 years old. I think it's a great signing. I think it's probably a coup as well. After a pretty productive 18 months at the Valley, but yeah, we'll see how it progresses because he's still very young.
Yeah, I saw a lot of Charlton fans who were kind of talking him down after he left Charlton. Now, I'm not sure if that's just the classic social media thing where, this player has left our club, therefore I don't rate him anymore. But when I was doing my research on him this time last week, I was thinking, yeah, he looks a tidy player, still 20 years old. Him and Tyrese Campbell, not that one, on either wing. I think that's pretty exciting, but obviously he's now gone. He's a versatile player, so I'm not sure where the idea is for Preston for playing him, but I'd be interested to see how he develops, and hopefully he'll settle down at somewhere, because as we say, he's had a fair few clubs despite only being 20 years old. And we'll finish off, Justin, with someone I had completely forgotten about, who's joined Watford. Former Middlesbrough left-back Marc Bola has signed a 3-year deal after leaving Turkish side Samsunspor. Yeah, someone I hadn't thought about for a while, and then he just popped up at Watford. How about that?
Yeah, I'm not bothered away by it.
It doesn't work at all.
No, it doesn't, does it?
It really doesn't work. Not even sure what the problem was meant to be there.
Yeah, I feel like I need to drag this out now because it's the final point I wanted to make before we finish the podcast, before we finish the episode. But yeah, he was a squad player at Borough in his final couple of seasons, and then obviously left, and now he's joined Watford. It is a strange one, probably just to add depth, I would say, in the fullback area, and also probably at centre half if needed as well. But you are right, someone I hadn't thought about for a while, because all I've got here is a shit pun.
Yeah, well, it definitely was that. Yeah, he was all right for Middlesbrough, wasn't he? I don't think there were huge cries of sadness when he decided to leave Teesside. So I'm surprised to see he's only 27. So how he gets on at Watford will be interesting. But yeah, that pun, Justin, really was a load of bollocks. No, that was even worse. But there we go, ladies and gents. This has been the Second Tier podcast, and this has been a news roundup of everything going on from across the Championship. So just a quick bit of admin before we round things off. Just to let you know, we'll be doing news episodes every Thursday for the next few weeks, where we'll be looking back on the latest goings on from across the Championship as the transfer business hopefully ramps up a bit more. not as much happening as I would have liked for it to be mid-June, but we've got plenty of manager news, and that's definitely tying us over in the meantime, Justin. But hopefully Championship clubs open their wallets very, very soon. And then we'll continue to have something different every Sunday to keep you guys entertained over the summer, starting with this Sunday, where we have the Second Tier Quiz 2. We look forward to seeing you then for that. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.